Today we've invited Patricia Cassaniti from Let's Talk About Safety to tell us about her journey through grief, suffering, loss, and wanting to make a difference. To commemorate Mental Health Month in October 2020, we talked to Patricia and she told us her story. Today we're going to give you some of the highlights of that interview. Lots of businesses are embarking on this journey about mental health and mental health training and mental health awareness, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to get a bird's eye view into the experience that you've had in building your own resilience.
Yes.
Many people know your story, and today I want you to help unpack that story. But I want it to be a story about triumph and tenacity and resilience and this whole notion of really having a burning desire to make a difference. I know that's who you are.
Yes.
And I want you to tell us a little bit about why that's the case. I'm interested in the who you are.
Well, I've always been a person that, likes to talk, and I've always been a person where people came to for advice and stuff like that. So when Christopher passed away, it was kind of shocking to everybody, and the way it happened, it was shocking. And for me, what I'm doing at the moment is because I don't want it. I'm still obviously coming to terms with the fact that he's gone. I haven't, I think of it sometimes that he's still going to come through the door. And I find that talking about it and making a difference in his name is something that I give him justice, because I know in our justice system he'll probably will never get justice. And his death I don't want ever to be in vain. So when I talk to people, I want to make sure that when they think of Christopher, they think about safety and how things should be done. Because I believe Christopher was an angel on earth. And
so for those of us who don't know the story, tell us a little bit about Christopher.
So Christopher was my middle son, and he had just turned 18. He's a very shy boy. Probably not one that would like attention. He was more of a follower. He'd always sit back and look at people and make sure that everybody was fine and everyone was good. And was very approachable, had the most amazing smile, would light up any room. And he had patience for everybody. He was a very patient child. He would take on even the most difficult children, people with special needs, and he would have patience for them.
Right.
And that's the type of child he was. And when
what were his early years like? So as his mother, what were his interests in his early years?
He was always into soccer.
Right.
Soccer, PlayStation, that was pretty much his life. He would never take on responsibilities to do anything. As I said, he was more of a follower. He would just do the things that other people would do. He was exceptional at his soccer. Absolutely loved it, and I'm actually very glad that he got to go overseas to play soccer. And
tell us a bit about that. What was he doing overseas playing?
He was on a small soccer tour in Carpi in Italy. So it was part of his soccer team that they went together, and I think he was about 17 when he did that.
Wow.
As a little boy, we went to Fiji and we got hit by 2 cyclones. And during that cyclone, he got severe anxiety. And it was a separation anxiety that it was very hard for him to go to school. So I found that things affected him emotionally quite easily. He went through separation anxiety for about 5 years before he snapped out of it. He was literally always by our sides, never would mingle with other children. He quit his soccer and he wouldn't play unless his dad would be on the field as a coach. And I found that that anxiety made him a very timid and shy child. And, you know, growing up, he slowly grew out of this anxiety, but still kept his shyness and wasn't an out there kind of child in my eyes. His cousins thought of him a bit differently because he used to be the sort of like the memes guy. He'd be the one making everybody laugh, and that's the cousin side, you know, and his friends, on how his demeanour would be, whether around us, and when I would see him, he'd be a very shy person. He'd always look up at myself or his dad for approval when he had to do something, and that's the kind of, you know, child that he was.
So a young man who was still building his identity.
Yes.
And he'd found this career in construction. And how was he going with that?
Oh, he loved it. Absolutely loved it. I was a coffee lady on that construction site, so I knew the boys at Future Form, and Christopher was just finishing year 10. Wasn't that keen at school. So I asked him the question. I knew he wanted to be a truck driver and demolition and doing all that, but he was still too young to get a license. So I said to him, well, whilst you're waiting to get yourself a license, why don't you get into construction? And having the contacts within the construction industry, I asked the Future Form company and they took him on. And even as a, you know, form worker, as much as he was a shy kid, he still did extremely well within an environment that is so men driven and so macho. He did extremely well. He was very much loved amongst his peers, and loved the camaraderie. Absolutely loved the camaraderie.
And of course, you being on site meant you saw him every day when you were on site. How did he feel about his mum being present at his workplace?
He loved it. He absolutely loved it. Even though there was times that, like, every time he'd come down, because I'd be there for first thing in the morning, because I'd drop him off with the van. I'd be there at Smoko, and then again at lunchtime. He'd always come down and come to the van and stay with me the whole time that I'd be there. And every time he'd give me a hug, every time he'd give me a kiss, to the point where I'd have to say, you need to stop. You need to stop kissing me and hugging me, because then they think I'm a you know, a very friendly coffee lady, and you know, I'm gonna have all these other men trying to kiss me and hug me at the same time. So he'd laugh, but all the men would come to the coffee van, and they would kind of tease him, because he'd go, oh, Mum's here with your lunch, and he'd be like, yeah, right. And go, well, I get a choice. I can have whatever I want on this van. And so he'd kind of give it back to them. But a lot of the men say he's the luckiest kid on site to be able to have whatever he wanted. And he, you know, he'd laugh at the banter that goes on in construction. Every afternoon when we'd go home in the afternoon, he'd tell me what would happen on site. And he would go, oh my God, you won't believe what happened today. He was having such a great time. And the camaraderie he built was amazing. And when he wasn't around and some of the supervisors would come up to me to get a coffee, they would always say to me, I don't know what you did, but he's amazing. And he was very much loved, very much loved within that construction industry.
And so he was one of the youngest team members.
Pretty much, yeah.
And how did he respond to that? How was that an issue for him?
No, I think he started very shy, but then got right into it. Like, you know, he was so I remember the day that they gave him the key to the shed, and he was responsible for the shed, which is where they keep all the tools and all that stuff. And he organised the shed so well that the supervisor said, we've never seen a shed on site that clean, because he had everything labelled, everything was done properly. And he goes, normally we can't find anything, but he would be there, first one opening up the shed and handing out tools to all the workers. So even just having that responsibility for him was a big thing for him. And, you know, being asked to stay back and shut the shed, make sure that all the tools were returned. He was glad, he was happy that they found that, you know, he was responsible enough to do that. So, and he took that job serious, very serious, and safety seriously too. You know what I mean? He'd do walks with his safety officer within Future Form to do, you know, checks on things, and he'd always tell me about it.
So you saw a young man who had his whole career ahead of him, and
Yes.
that career was a career in construction. Did
Yes.
you feel that he had taken to this? His original aspirations of being a driver had changed after he'd
Yes.
been in construction?
Well, his whole, I mean, even his body changed. Like from the pictures that I took on the first day that he started to a year on, his whole body changed in regards to, like, you know, becoming a child to a man.
Today you've got this teddy bear with you, and I know that when you do your talks, your Let's Talk About Safety talks, the teddy bear comes with you, and many people have asked me what this teddy bear is, what the teddy bear represents. So tell us a story about the teddy.
Teddy, this is Chris Toolbox Teddy, and he's my mascot, but he's also extremely special. When Christopher passed away, I wanted something to hold on to, and the first thing that came to mind was to get a teddy, but it was supposed to be a teddy just for home. Now I've made him into a construction teddy. So he's actually wearing Christopher's t-shirt, which was cut to size.
His actual t-shirt.
And it was sewn by a friend of mine, and she kept, you know, the logo and exactly the same as he would wear it. And it's even got the tag. I bought him a tool belt, you know, his boots that he used to wear, and he always wore glasses. So this teddy also carries Christopher's ashes. So there's some of his ashes are in there in a little test tube, which can be quite funny when I'm travelling on planes, because he has to go through the scanner and you see this little test tube in there. So it's a bit of a laugh, because people kind of look at me and say, what is in this test tube?
And have you been questioned about the content of the test tube?
Only once, and I said to them it's remains and ashes of my son, and they just, oh yep, okay, no problem, keep going, and so they don't really question it any further. But it's kind of like a teddy that represents Christopher. It also has a message.
Yeah, there's something also special about, apart from the ashes that carry Christopher's life force.
Yes.
There's another special message in this teddy. So
There
tell
is.
us about that.
So the message is, it's a little recording, and it's once you press the recording, it's his last kind of speech that he made on his 18th birthday, which was 2 days before he passed away. And it's basically after he cut the cake and was thanking everybody. And there's
something unique about that
There
last
is.
speech that he gave. What's unique
well,
about
he was thanking everyone at the party for his gifts, but there's one thing that he does say, and it's been a great 18 years.
Right.
Which, after listening to his speech, I kind of thought, wow, that, you know, for him for an 18-year-old to even say that in a speech, it's been a great 18 years. It's not something you would normally say.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And so I've captured that part of that speech and I've placed it into the teddy bear so that when I press his paw, he actually says the speech. Did you want to hear it?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'd love to.
So it's in his paw. So unfortunately, there's a lot of background noise,
Sure.
which I've actually tried to have separated from his voice and just have his voice. Christopher was very camera shy. The minute a camera or a phone came out, he'd run for the hills.
Right.
So for him, even just doing the speech was very hard. So as he's thinking, there's a lot of background noise of people encouraging to keep talking and saying that. So, and that's why it's muffled, but it's that little message of it's been a great 18 years that sticks.
And soon after the tragedy, you got up with your husband Robert and decided you wanted to go out and send a message to the rest of the world.
Yes.
That we had to do something about construction safety.
Yeah.
And we had to take care of people so that this wouldn't happen again.
Yes.
What gave you the strength to do that?
It kind of just happened. It wasn't something that I just put my hand up and said, this is what I'm going to do. It kind of happened naturally. And the first time I actually went on stage and spoke to workers was May 1st, which was exactly a month later. And it was the May Day March, which the union puts together. On that day, one of the union members said, would you like to talk on the day and sort of like address the workers? And I said yes. Basically, I just wanted to say, I want you all to be safe. And what's happened to Christopher should never have happened in the first place. And it shouldn't happen in future. And that's how it started, that I wanted to get this message across to the workers. And that day, I think would have been one of the biggest rally that they ever had for a very long time. And I think it's because it was only a month after Christopher had died. I feel that when Christopher did die, it was like an atomic bomb had hit Sydney. I believe that everybody knows Christopher's name. You just have to say, do you know of Christopher? And most people know and can remember what they were doing on the day that Christopher died and heard the news. I don't think I've come across anybody that has said, no, I don't remember, or no, I'm not too sure of the incident. Everybody in Sydney knows of the incident of when Christopher died. And for me, that's my driving factor.
Despite the best efforts of the regulators and legislators regarding workplace safety, we're still getting about one person a day dying in Australian workplaces. What gives you this motivation to go out and tell your story to construction workers? My motivation, I must say, is my anger. I find that my anger is so intense that if I don't turn it into a positive, I don't think I'd be here today. For what happened to myself and my husband is probably one of the worst things in life. Not only was Christopher a worker, but he's a son. And to lose a child in circumstances like Christopher is beyond comprehensible. What happened to him was something that should never have happened in the first place. And as a mum, I pray for my children to come home safe from
driving because they've just gotten their license, from when they go out to party so that they don't delve into alcohol and drugs. You pray for their safety all the time. But one thing you don't do is pray for them to go to work and come home safe.
Mm.
It's not something we do. And
we take for granted
we do.
that they go to work and they come home safely.
Yes, we all do. We all need to go to work. We all need to make a living and come home because we've got mouths to feed. Now, here is Christopher, just turned 18, making something out of himself. And you're proud, as a mum, you're so proud of him taking on a job that is, beyond his years, in the sense that, it is hard work. It is very hard work to go into straight away, straight after school. And I was very proud of how he conducted it and how he conducted himself within the workforce. And taking on those responsibilities that a 17 going on to 18 would do. And when someone is taken away from you in such circumstances, the anger just envelops you. And I get up in the morning thinking, no, I can't have that anger take my life. Because I do have other kids.
Mm.
I've got other children I've got to look after and give them purpose in life to live on, because Christopher was such a beautiful person.
And I know some people have said, we're worried about your mental health because we're worried that you haven't even started this grieving process.
Yes.
That all of your energy is being channeled into the crusade of talking about safety and making a difference, and making sure that by bringing safety awareness into the workplace, this doesn't happen to somebody else,
Yes.
another family. What are your thoughts on how you're dealing with the grief?
Well, I believe that I still haven't come to terms with his death. I think it's something in the back of my mind that I haven't accepted yet. But in the process of me trying to cope with everyday life is to make sure that in his name that I can save somebody else's life. And I think that's what keeps me sane and keeps me going every single day.
Because there's a real urgency about this message that you
There
have,
is.
isn't there? Just tell us in the last 2 weeks how many sessions you've run on safety in workplaces.
I've been to at least one every 2 days. Each session, because of COVID, has been 4 times. So I've had my talk split up into 4 sessions. So I've spoken 4 times in one workplace.
And this must be an extraordinary level of energy that you have to apply every
Yes.
time to tell the story. I know next week in Barangaroo you're doing 7 sessions in one day.
Yes.
So how do you get the energy and the vitality to strive to continue on with this story and this message?
Although it's draining, it does drain me, because after my talks I'm quite drained. But I do, my recharge is obviously a place in the river that we go to, and I recharge. Everything else in my life at the moment has no importance. The smallest of problems is not an issue anymore, because I think the worst that could possibly ever happen to me has already happened. And it's me trying to overcome it and trying to override the anger. And what I find is when I do my talks, it's my therapy.
Right.
It is, because when I don't do my talks, I'm actually worse than I am. And I find that coping with life is much harder, because when I stand in front of the workers, I stand in front of the workers as mum. So I don't want to perceive myself as a safety supervisor. I'm not there as a supervisor or tell them what they have to do. All I want them to know is that complacency is going to kill. And I just want them to know that they've got a family at home that they've got to go to, which when someone walks into a workplace, they're there to do their job. That's it. That's where there's a line there. I'm here to do my job. Unfortunately, with construction, it's the speaking up that is a bit of a problem. A lot of people are victimized and they feel that they can't speak up because they have fear of losing their job. I want to be the courage, I want to be the mum figure to say you have every right to speak up so that you can go home to your mum or your wife and your children.
Your story has certainly garnered a lot of interest from political parties, and both sides of politics have had a very strong interest in your message. What's been one of the really positive elements of your engagement with politics, and perhaps one of the more negative ones?
When I first met with the minister, Kevin Anderson, that was our first interaction with politics and government.
And what party is Kevin from?
He's Liberal,
right.
Liberal Party. He's the Minister of Better Regulations and Innovation. So when we met up with him, the first thing I said to him was that I want a Crime Stoppers for workers.
What does that look like? What was the vision that you painted, the picture that you painted for that?
Knowing that the construction industry was a lot to do with the macho, the macho feel of I can't do this because I'm going to be victimized. I know that there's people out there that would want to say something, but they don't.
When you say something, is this about
speak up about
a safety breach, a perceived safety issue?
There's a lot of bullying that goes on in construction, and sometimes it's overlooked. It's accepted. It's an accepted thing that even when apprentices come into the workforce within a construction industry, they cop a lot of things. They cop, things like go get me a left-handed hammer, or the apprentice will kind of go because they're just being told to do that, not thinking.
So these initiation rituals,
there is rituals,
this belittling that happens. As far as you're aware, from the people you've spoken to, this is still going on in construction.
It still does, yeah. I mean, if you're a concreter, there's certain things that, they'll break a whole bag of concrete on you. And it is so dangerous. It is such a dangerous act to do. But people still today do it as part of initiation of an apprentice. And it's not just about that. It's not just about the issue of the initiation of apprenticeships. It's the young being taught the wrong thing right from the beginning. And
so going back to Kevin Anderson, how was that initial engagement with him? Because I understand that there was a lot of interest in what you were trying to do. There was a lot of interest in building an app that would give workers access to anonymous reporting of perceived safety breaches, and you were excited about this innovation. What happened with all of this?
Well, what happened was because when I spoke to Kevin, I said I want the culture to change. The culture of the industry must change for betterment of the industry. So the way things are done. So going to him and saying to him that I wanted a Crime Stoppers for workers was coming up with an app so that workers can anonymously go into the app and report any unsafe work practices anonymously to Safe Work, and then Safe Work can then investigate and deal with the situations.
And what happened with this app?
It was put together within 4 months, which was fantastic. That's one thing that I did say I want it immediately. I didn't want it to happen in 2 years' time, which things tend to take within government before things get rolled over. So the app, thanks to Kevin, was done immediately, and within 4 months it was launched. And it launched in October, and statistics were showing from October 2019 to I think March or August, there was 2,734 submissions made by workers, and the app hadn't even hit the App Store yet, because it takes 4 months for it to actually be approved to be part of a Play Store or an App Store. And it had been, 2,734 workers that actually used the app, which helps Safe Work to pinpoint the issues, because obviously there's areas, there's different builders, there's different categories within the industry that these unsafe work practices were reported upon, so that it gives them a better reporting at the end of the year of what seems to be the issue within that industry. Obviously, falls risk was one of them, scaffolding and all the kind of things that happen within falling, open penetrations, power lines going through scaffolding, which was one of the reports that was sent in. The photos helped Safe Work to be able to identify how bad the situation is and how quickly they needed to triage it and get onto the sites. So it's helped pinpoint the issues that people have, yet has given the courage for the worker to speak up anonymously.
Fantastic.
So,
and where is the app now? Are people using it?
Yes. Well, when Christopher passed away, Safe Work initiated Operation Scaff Safe, which started in April and went right through to October. The statistics had shown that they visited over 700 sites just regarding scaffold and checking scaffolds, and 44% of those sites had scaffold with missing components and parts. And 34% of those sites, it was because of an unlicensed worker actually removed those components. Like we all know, even though me not being in it,
extraordinary statistics.
It's huge. It's nearly half. Half the sites that they visited, something was wrong with the scaffold. Scaffold is a structure that is extremely important within the construction industry. It allows the workers obviously to work at heights, but if you're removing components like as handrails or things that are quite detrimental to someone's life when they're on the scaffold, then, it causes these issues of falls and, people falling off scaffold or going through penetrations, or, it's such a big issue that is still happening today. Now, the second lot of statistics came through this October. The amount and the percentage actually increased. SafeWork does feel that it's because of the app that they have found more sites that had unsafe scaffolds and were reported. So that's why I think the statistics did go up. As much as it is still disappointing that people still aren't embracing the fact that scaffold is not to be touched unless you have a ticket. And it's part of my talk, and I do specify that no one should be touching scaffold unless they do have a scaffolding ticket.
So we know you're doing a lot of these talks at the moment, the Let's Talk About Safety talks. So what are employers wanting in these talks? Why are they coming to you? What's the central message here?
For me, it's making sure that I can shift complacency in the worker.
Yeah.
That's the main purpose of my talk. It's to go there on a personal level and to resonate with the worker on a personal side more than a safety officer getting in front of them and telling them about the issues or the safety issues that they may have on the day.
But if this culture of fear, this culture of underreporting is so endemic, how are you going to shift this by doing a 20-minute toolbox talk?
It's making the worker realise that it's not just work that they're at. Yes, they do have to do their job, but they need to do their job safely, not comfortably, which is what complacency does. It's complacency will always overrule what we know is safe to do in the first place. And when they identify complacency in their workplace as a worker, they can actually eliminate that and then say, no, well, I'm at work. Yes, I'm going to do my job, but I'm going to do it safely so I can go home safe to my family.
So here I am as a safety manager wanting to engage you to tell this story. What do you think is the key component of your story?
It's personable. It's relatable to, I make them think about home. And when they come to work, not only do they have to think about the job, but it's like a mum talking to a worker or to a husband, or a wife talking to a husband on a personal level. It's not a professional level when a safety officer gets in front of their workers and tells them about the safety issues.
October's Mental Health Month, and we wanted you to come on today to talk about your story and Christopher's story. What do you think it's a story about?
It is about awareness, awareness about the dangers in the industry, especially in construction. We all know it's a dangerous industry. We all go into work thinking that we're just going to get our job done and go home without realising that there is dangers around it that we have to sort of like think twice about doing, and listening to our guts. That kind of gut feeling where you think, oh, that doesn't look right, but you feel you have to do it because you've been told to do it. It's allowing you to stop and speak up when there is an unsafe situation happening or in front of you that you think, oh, it's not my job.
And many people have likened your story. They've actually said Patricia's story is the Daniel Morecambe story of construction. What do you think about that? I mean, obviously the Morecambes have got a great story about child safety. Is your story paralleling to that story about Daniel Morecambe?
I feel when Christopher died, everybody was kind of stopped in their tracks. When the news broke, especially in the construction industry, everyone kind of stopped and thought, oh my goodness, how can something like this happen in today's age, where
with all the technology,
with everything that's out,
with the advancement
safety protocols,
yeah. Safety systems,
yes.
This ongoing beating the drum about workplace safety,
yes.
And still a tragic accident can happen like this. Yeah. It was unforeseeable.
It was unforeseeable in some sense, because I always say to the workers, it's never an accident, because we have so many protocols in place, and the workers get drummed every single day. They get given swims, they get given the lecture of what's happening that day, of any unsafe work practices that may arise that they should be aware of. But it becomes monotony to them. It becomes very monotonous, and they don't think about, the dangers that they may face during the day. Now, I always say that it is never an accident, but it's an incident waiting to happen, because it's allowing the person to continue with complacent decisions, one on top of the other, that will cause incidents like what happened to Christopher. And it's, it's a split-second decision that can change someone's life.
And so justice for Christopher, for you, is about getting this message to as many people as possible.
Yes.
And
justice for Christopher is that this is the only way I'm going to be able to feel that he has had justice in life.
And in many ways, it sounds to me like this is your way of working through your grief.
Yes.
And working through the suffering and the pain of loss.
Most definitely. Because if Christopher can save another life, I can't bring Christopher back. There's nothing in this world that I can do to bring my son back. So I don't want Christopher to be forgotten. That's something that is instilled into my head, that I'm honoured. I'm actually humbled and honoured that people know Christopher just, because of what happened, and that he's not forgotten. And it's a beautiful thing that he is honoured within the construction industry. But I want to keep that legacy going, because when Christopher's name gets mentioned, people say, yes, and they relate to him to safety.
One of the other aspects that you've talked about is this whole notion of having a law called Christopher's Law. What does that mean? What's the thing you're looking for in creating a law called Christopher's Law?
Christopher's Law overall is to give the courage to the worker to speak up,
right,
without being victimised. That's overall what I want, and changing that culture where you're in this industry where you don't feel that you can speak up because you're going to get bullied or you're going to be shown the door because you've said something. The other parts of Christopher's Law are things like, introducing independent safety officers to all work sites, so that they're not employed by the builder or the company. They are an external officer that comes in and is not biased to one thing, and he does not walk around the site with blinkers on and identifying unsafe work practices, but being too scared because they're employed by the actual builder to say and address that this has to change because it costs money to do so.
One of the biggest frustrations you have right now is that you don't actually know what happened to Christopher.
Yeah.
You haven't got a leading cause. If you could turn to that person that you think is responsible for what happened that day, what would you say to that person?
That's a harder question, because I feel the only thing that I could say to them is I hope that it will never happen again. And I hope that the thoughts of that complacent thought that passed through your mind does not go through somebody else's mind, because it seems to be happening all the time. Unsafe work practices aren't stopping. People still feel that they're doing what they're told to do, even though they feel in their gut that it is unsafe to do. But it's their job and they have to do it. I just hope that my message resonates with workers on that level to say, no, it's my life and I feel it's dangerous for me to do this, and just overall give them the courage to speak up and say no to these, because if we do say no, these incidents would stop. It's going to be, I'm not expecting it to happen overnight, but I can't do this on my own. It's not something I can change on my own. It has to be done with everybody else and everyone's help to do this.
Thank you for taking the time to speak to us today, and for
No,
having
pleasure.
the courage to share Christopher's story and your story, and to talk about how you're managing grief in the face of building this incredible resilience bank. And I think it's been a fantastic story. It's been very moving to speak with you, and I hope that people who are watching just take that one moment of care,
Yes.
more than they did yesterday, to make that difference and save lives.
Definitely. And it's all in honour of Christopher. That's all it is.
Thank you.